Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Kathy Leckey. Kathy is a self-care coach, author, TEDx speaker, and the vice president of Something New LLC, which powers one of the organizations I am so happy to be a part of, which is the Outlier Project. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I can't believe you asked me to do this so long ago, and it was such an example of how fast time flies, but I'm so excited we're finally here.
I'm so happy that you are sharing this time with me. And folks, we're going to be speaking about self-care or else. And if self-care is something you've been thinking about or have questions about, then this episode is for you. But Kathy, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, like you said, I do work with Scott McGregor at Something New, and we run the Outlier Project with the idea that anyone can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And then I started doing this coaching about 4 years ago now. And it's just another piece of my evolution, which all started through figuring out what self-care really meant. So I'm a mom of 3. I live in Connecticut, and I'm just constantly diving into different things and learning new things. So always something exciting going on over here.
And I love that you mentioned Scott, a wonderful example of someone leading and allowing others to lead at the same time. And we learned so much from the Outlier Project. So I'm also appreciative of him. And he has been on my show. So it's
Yeah.
nice to have you in turn this time around. Now we're talking about self-care. And I know this is a journey that you've been on and now are helping others to go into and discover for themselves. But I noticed that a lot of people don't even know what self-care is. So, what is self-care?
That's right. A lot of people will ask me that question, and the truth is that I did not know what self-care was just a few years ago. I went through, well, when I did my TED Talk, it was because I was going through a devastating life circumstance. And at the time, I found that I was really strong, and I kept getting knocked down and kept getting back up and figuring things out, taking care of the kids and everything I needed to do. And people would say, I can't believe you're doing it. I don't know how you do it. And the truth was, I didn't know how I was doing it either. I was very strong, but I've learned, and I can see now where I was not healthy. In the years that followed, I recognized that I was in situations that the only common denominator was myself. And I knew that I had to figure out how to change that, really. And so I started doing some researching and reading, and I started to learn about codependency and how that impacted me and my relationships with people, with money, with my kids, with everything. And I would read the beginning of these books, and I would identify with all of the patterns of people pleasing and not having healthy boundaries and not trusting myself, having to look outside for answers. And when it came to how to heal, it was always talking about self-care. And at that point, I really, truly, literally started Googling, what is self-care? What does that mean? How do you do self-care? I didn't know what it meant. It means getting to know myself at a really deep level of what I need, what I want, what I believe, and actually being able to ask for that from the people around me, to be able to take care of myself, trust myself, forgive myself for things from the past. It boils down to that connecting to myself, really getting to know myself.
And I love that you said you came up on the one recurring common denominator, and it's you, right? And then everything that we
Right.
do, everything, it's us. And what I found throughout time is that people lose themselves. They lose themselves to relationships, they lose themselves to jobs, they lose themselves to their commitments around them daily, always asking something of us. And we answer the call. And like you mentioned, I didn't know how I was doing it. That's the story for most people. And not knowing what self-care is, there's just no way you can identify. But you just mentioned that you realize the impacts, right? And then talking about impacts, what are the impacts of having or not having self-care as your goal?
For me, the impact was that I was a people pleaser. So in my quest to be strong through everything, it was really to keep up the image of what I thought about myself and what I wanted other people to see. So I was really strong in keeping that image going. On the inside, I felt like I was falling apart. And when I tell people, or when I would tell people, confide in people, they would be shocked by that. So at the time, I was making myself feel better, self-medicating with alcohol. I was abusing alcohol. I was distracting myself in unhealthy relationships. I was distracting myself with pretty much anything that I could find to spend my attention on other than myself. I was a notorious people pleaser. And people pleasing is a sign that we are focused on taking care of other people's needs before ourselves. And there's, when we talk about this, people pleasing isn't necessarily a bad thing. Making sure that people are comfortable and happy and taken care of is not a bad thing. It's only detrimental to us when we do it more than we take care of ourselves, more than we're checking in with ourselves. So in people pleasing, that showed up for me that I would stay in an unhealthy relationship or an unhealthy job. I would stay at a place that was not healthy for me longer than I should have, because I didn't want to disappoint someone. I didn't want to appear like I was failing. It was all based on outside perceptions of what I was concerned about. I wasn't concerned about what it was doing to me. So it can have really serious ramifications. There's a low level stress when you're not taking care of yourself. They talk about illness is caused, 90% of illness is caused by stress. Well, when we're not listening to ourselves and we're living a life that is not in tune with that, that causes stress. It causes physical illness. It can cause financial ruin. A lot of people that I work with, there are boundaries that they didn't have in place, or that they didn't feel confident enough to enforce, that allowed for that financial abuse. And so I'm very careful about using the word victim. We definitely, when we don't have strong self-care practices, we can look and appear to be the victim of people who take advantage of us. But when we really look at it, we start to see where we are responsible for how we teach people how to treat us, what we're willing to or not willing to put up with, all of the boundaries, right? So emotional boundaries, financial boundaries, our boundaries with our time. If we're at work, we might say, I'm not answering the phone after 7 o'clock. And then when the phone rings at 7:05, even if we want to impress our boss, or even if we want to know what the fire of the day is, we don't answer the phone. That's how we enforce boundaries. It's not by making someone else change their behavior. We have to really take control of our own behavior. And that is self-care. A lot of people think it's, getting a massage once a month, which is great. I love a massage. A lot of people think it's going to the gym. They'll say, well, I take care of myself. I go to the gym every morning. That's great. That's a part of it. But what I talk about is more of these subtle, every day, all day long thoughts, beliefs, using our breath, staying present. That is true, real self care.
As you're speaking about that whole scenario, I started to look at the difference between self care and self preservation. They look the same in theory, but they're not, right? And self care is what you've just mentioned there, thinking of yourself in a way where you can make decisions that are in your best interest. And you not only can speak those things, but you can actually act on that, right? The phone call thing is very real for a lot
Right.
of us that are especially in business, small business, or even in a trade where you deal with people. You always want to be available, but there is sometimes that you have to set some boundaries to ensure that you can provide that level maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
you have to do that. And I love that. And folks that are listening, if you are in the battle between self care and self preservation, this is the key. This is the reminder, the bell that they are not the same and you can do something about it. I love that.
So,
Now,
and Enrique, when you said the topic of setting boundaries and wanting to be available and wanting to impress your customers and give them, the opposite of that is that your customer is going to think that you're selfish, you're not available. It's all of these negative things, right? And so the ability to set these boundaries actually comes from knowing yourself well enough to know that you are a responsible you're a responsible business owner, that you give great customer service when it's the appropriate times, and that you're a good person, you're not lazy, you're not all of these things that somebody else may be, or that you may think that is being implied by that. So when you trust yourself and you know yourself well enough to know, I've done my job and at 7 o'clock, I need that time to be with my family, to recharge, to do all these things so that tomorrow morning I can be the best version of myself. So you can't set the boundaries until you develop that sense of self and that self trust in your, trust in yourself. So it's all, there's so many topics that are all interconnected, and each one helps each other.
another thing I thought of when you was talking about that was a time I remember someone that was in charge or maybe higher than I assumed that they could approach me with a certain amount of language and force. And I was quick to say, look, I appreciate the role you have in this company. And I appreciate the demands on your job, but that's the last time you'll ever address me like that. And you will not believe the effect that that had because an abuser
Yes.
tried to abuse me not knowing that I knew myself. So,
Right. And you know yourself well enough to know that if they call you lazy or they call you irresponsible, that you know yourself so well that that's not true, that it doesn't even matter anymore. And they know because of your boundary that that's what you're willing to accept, that that's what you're not willing to accept. And you have to be the one that says, if you speak to me that way, I will turn around and walk away. I will not engage. You can keep talking, but I'm going to walk away. And if they follow you, I mean, and this happens in real life, right? They'll say, but they follow me into the kitchen, they follow me into the break room. Well, then you leave that room or you close the door behind you, you lock the door, you do what you need to do to protect yourself.
yeah, and as we're talking about leaders, this topic comes up a lot in leadership because leaders, you would think that by the word leaders, they're setting examples, but some of the most notorious that actually battle self care are leaders
Yes.
and they have a hard time with it. So, what do leaders need to consider when planning out? Because I do know that it's a very intentional thing to get to this place, but planning out their self-care.
It really is. I use my phone a lot for self-care. So I have reminders. Actually, I just picked it up to, as a habit, and there's a reminder there. I have reminders throughout the day to take a breath. I have reminders throughout the day that come up with a certain phrase that motivates me. I have one that pops up with the link to a meditation that I use. And so I use my phone to automate my self-care. What leaders have to remember is that they're leading by example, by their actions. And so when they are taking care of themselves, when they are um, using healthy boundaries, when they are allowing for people to speak up without fear of retaliation, things like that, that they're creating a culture where people feel like it is okay and not selfish to practice self-care. They need to be showing that their phone is off at a certain time and that they have, there's so much in leadership that they want to, that I see that they're, again, trying to prove something that doesn't need to be proven. They're trying to prove that they're the best or the strongest or the one that stays the longest. But if you're actually doing the work and doing the job, that speaks for itself. And we don't need that external validation, which is, I mean, when you really start to practice self-care, the need for the external validation just goes away for everything. And so leaders have to, in my opinion, allow that space and practice, lead by example. Having certain times of the day that are blocked off for your employees to take a break and know that that's okay. Because, a midday break, a 10-minute midday break to take a walk, to sit and meditate, to listen to some music, it really does recharge you in a way that your afternoon is a completely, you can approach it with a completely different energy.
Yeah, I remember going on walks, and I would say at least once an hour, I was going out to walk.
Right.
And before I knew it, there were people joining me. And we would
Yeah.
go on walks and come back, do our work, but we got out, we got air, we got
Yeah.
sunshine, we got to speak about something other than work.
Yeah.
And it was
10
such a
minutes, right? It's
great,
just a short little 10 minutes. I think people think that they need to schedule. I've actually had people say, I'm going to schedule a day to do self-care. The chances of them being able to block out a whole day are so slim, but can you block out 1 minute? And I mean literally 1 minute to sit, close your eyes, and just breathe. That is self-care. It just, I always want to make it easy, free if I can, because there's so much. When I was really struggling financially, I didn't have $100 to go get a massage or to go to a class or to do other things. So I really found a lot of things that were free or inexpensive, always accessible, like our breath, like our thoughts, that make a massive, huge difference in our overall well-being. And I can tell you, in the few years, and that's, it doesn't take long. Once you start practicing self-care, it doesn't take long to start seeing the results. And a lot of people will come in and they'll say, but I've thought this way for 30, 40, 50 years already, and I've always done it this way. And they almost feel defeated, like, I'll never be able to change. And that's just simply not true. We have the choice to make changes all day long, every single day. And the results are so much quicker than we can possibly imagine when we start focusing on ourself instead of everyone else.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned things like massages and walking. And so there are different resources that you can do without coming out of the bank, right? Because sometimes just people don't have that for that.
Right.
But there are so many different types of resources that are available to us. So I wanted to ask you, what resources are there to help us chart a course toward self-care?
So a self-care program is a completely individual endeavor. That is, self-care for each person can look completely different. So it's really just spending time alone and quiet so that you can listen to what you desire, what it is that you need in your life. For some people, it's something that has a lot of energy. They might, self-care might be going to listen to live music, right? And then for other people, it might be sitting in the woods by themselves. For some people, it's playing an athletic sport. Golf is a very meditative, quiets your mind, gets rid of all other distractions. But we don't talk about golf as being self-care, right? And so it really comes down to figuring out what works for you. And that answer changes every day, and that answer changes throughout your life. And so it's staying in tune with what works for you all the time. I started, one of the things in the healing was, it would say like, self-care is doing more of what brings you joy. I did not know what brought me joy. I really didn't know. My whole day was work, taking care of the kids, whatever that was. And so I started just making a note on my phone, keeping a note on my phone of anytime I saw someone else doing something that I was like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I wish I had time, or I wish I had learned, whatever it was, no matter what, I wrote it down on my list. And that's how my self-care shit, the workbook started, was because I started making these lists to remind myself, if I have a half an hour, I used to dread it. My kids would, maybe go with their dad or go to their friends, whatever it was. And I would sit there and feel this sense of dread because I didn't know what to do with myself. So I had to figure out what were the things that made me happy. Taking my dog for a walk, going to visit a friend with a baby, whatever it was. So the resources are unlimited. It can be anything, but the answer, the real resources from within yourself, and then obviously you can work with other people. And once you get on the path, you will find the ways that work for you.
And you bring up something that's so important, and it goes back to your earlier comment about you, right? Finding you. That is something that a lot of people have never seen since, and I remember going through a process myself. And I remember at the time I believe I was 45 or 47, one or two. And I remember telling my wife, I have not seen this Enrique since I was 5 years old.
Yes. Yep.
It's a long time to
Yeah.
not identify with someone. And so, to your point of I didn't know what to do even when I was by myself. It's because we just don't take the time to explore that person. In my case, it was prior to being affected by adults, right?
Yeah.
That was the earliest age I can remember that I was not impacted in a negative way by an adult. And so, but once I found that little boy,
Yeah.
it was just wonderful.
Well, we
Um,
do talk about that. We talk about inner child work, which is maybe a completely foreign concept to some people who don't, they might have never heard of it or understood it, but we very simply get to what that really means. And For me, I remember as a kid always wanting to swim with the dolphins and be a dolphin trainer. So one of the things I found that makes me really happy is going to the aquarium, right? Like somebody else might never want to go to the aquarium, but for me, that like fills me up. And it is connecting to those things that we used to love until we got busy with school and then our jobs and then our significant others and our kids, and we started taking care of them, and we started cooking for them what they like to eat. We started going to places that they wanted to go to. We started listening to music that they wanted to listen to, until after so many years of that, we forgot what it was that we liked. And that's why I love to work with younger people before they start making these decisions, these lifelong decisions about what career they're choosing. Is it based on what other people are pushing toward them, or is it really something that they're connected to? Before they get into relationships where they're tolerating behaviors that aren't okay, and before they forget about who they are and give that all away.
That reminds me of a conversation. My heart broke when I heard him say, well, I'm going to go to college to do this thing that my mom wants me to do. I said, oh, Lord. He's about to lose
Yeah.
everything that he is about for the
Mm.
sake of someone else's wishes. And, your points are solid. And I wonder how many people listening have lost themselves to other people's wishes. And if this is pricking at your heart, then maybe, this next section that we're going to be covering will
Well, and I just
inspire
want
you.
to say too, is that we do it with good intentions, right? Like that kid is doing it to make his parents proud, to make his mother proud. He feels like he's doing the right thing. We give to our kids and our family and our bosses, whatever, because we feel like we're doing the right thing. We are the caregivers. We take on too much because we're trying to help. So I always have to remind people that the behaviors aren't bad, inherently bad things. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that we need to reclaim some of that energy and attention back to ourselves.
Ownership has a different approach to many areas of our lives. This one really, really matters, right? So
Right.
I wanted to ask you in terms of your transformation and the things that you've seen in others. So what transformative examples have you seen in initiating self-care?
My life has changed drastically from my career, uh, personally, my relationships with my kids, my relationships with food, with money. I went from not being able to buy toothpaste and really feeling like a victim, like that I was financially ruined and I could never recover, to taking complete responsibility. I worked with a finance coach who made me actually look at all of the things I was afraid of, which was my bank register, and make a very active plan and be a part of that healing. And I was able to buy a condo 2 years ago. I'm looking to buy a second property in the near future. So that is and so with that, just with that one piece, that financial piece, came the feelings of being confident, powerful, capable. I can trust myself to take care of myself. So in these actions, we get these subconscious messages to ourselves that we are trustworthy, we're capable. So that's just one example. I the the theme. So I work with different people. I think one of my favorites is a young woman that just graduated from college. And she came to me because she was having trouble making friends with her relationships. And it was in different areas of her life. And she came to me and she said, there's got to be something that I'm doing or not doing. It can't be that the whole world is against me. And just from that, I was so proud of her for taking the responsibility. And we did. We found things, we found beliefs in her that she wasn't good enough. And so when she approached a group feeling like she wasn't good enough, she gave off certain signals. She actually wouldn't say hello to a group of people because she was feeling so intimidated, but the perception was that she wasn't a friendly person. So who would want to talk to her? A lot of people that I end up coaching are either in an unhealthy relationship at work or at home, or they are just coming out of it. And so they're looking to not repeat the mistakes that they've made before in choosing a new workplace or a new relationship, whether that's a friend or a romantic relationship. And so we look at their beliefs, the thinking that they have around being able to trust themselves in making these decisions. And I would say within, a few weeks, people definitely feel and start to make these changes and feel the difference. And within a few months, things have remarkably changed.
It's amazing when you decide for you. Decide for you. I mean, give
Yeah,
yourself the best chance. And that starts with you identifying that, hey, you may have not been at the front of the line when it's time to get right. And for a lot of people, the saying goes, if you don't have it, you can't give it. And this is one of those areas that you must have it. You must have self-care as part of your life and as part of your strategy to life, because if you're gone, then what? Right? I'll
right,
tell you that the world will not stop revolving. People will not start to die off. It's almost like a blip in a big pond, right? It's just so take care of yourself. Make yourself the priority in terms of ensuring that you can provide tomorrow. Because
right.
if
And
you
how many
can't do it,
people do you hear today that are exhausted? They're overwhelmed, they're so stressed out, they're all of these feelings are really signs that there's not a good self-care practice in place. Because a lot of that exhaustion and that overwhelm and that stress is really mental, right? Most of us are not out working physical jobs that are exhausting us to the point that we're feeling it these days. It's very much a mental exhaustion, and learning to breathe and be present and eliminate stress by speaking up for ourselves and making these choices to care for ourselves has a huge impact on that.
now, Kathy, you mentioned great examples there, both from your aspect and from some of the clients that you help. So, what do you have coming up? What are you involved with? And more importantly, how can they get a hold of you to help them get into a position that they are instituting, self care and thriving?
Yeah, so that one's easy. That's my website is kathyleckey.com, and that has more information and how I work with people and coaching. And what's new and exciting is I am waiting for I have a so I have my self-care shit, the workbook that's on Amazon right now, but I have a 12-week, sometimes 16-week program that I take people through coaching. And I decided to write that down and make a book of it. And I have that out at a publisher right now, and I'm just waiting to hear back from them. But however that goes, that book will be the next book that comes out. And it's right now it's called My Self Care Shit More Than Manicures and Massages. um, finding the peace and stability we crave through everyday self-care. And that was what I was craving so much during the turmoil and the tough years, was just peace and stability. And both of those things I found through my self-care practice.
So is that workbook a tandem to your book?
Well, it was actually a lesson in healing from codependency. It was a lesson in self-care. Is Originally my idea was that I would have a book and then I would have a workbook to go with it. Well, the workbook finished itself first, and I allowed it to. I didn't, hold myself back and say, well, it was supposed to be this way. I put it out there. I I had to be okay with the fact that I found a couple mistakes in it. I had to be okay with the fact that some people might not like it. There was a lot of codependent fears and thoughts behind it that I had to push through to get it from the idea. And I did all of the work and the cover, and I got it onto Amazon myself. That was really the exercise, was for me to provide that to the people that I coach, and get it out into the world. So yeah, so that wasn't the original plan, but I'm okay with that. And I think the book will be interesting because I'm sharing the different topics, like setting boundaries, trusting yourself, forgiving yourself, and I'm using the same structure as my coaching classes, and I'm using stories from all of the things that I've gone through and learned myself, and also in combination with some of the stories of my clients, without names, of course. But so I'm really excited about it. I've been doing some speaking. I did a keynote speech for Warrior Rising, which was really exciting. And so I'm looking to do some more speaking, and I just want to help people feel as good as I do. I know it's possible, no matter what's happening in their life, because a lot of my circumstance, I could sit and tell you all of the circumstances I'm not happy with at the moment, or, you know, um, but overall, I have a really strong feeling of peace and happiness that I don't let people or circumstances take anymore.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, and I'm so proud of you for going down, identifying that this is a need in your life, going down that road, and now helping others. And I really appreciate the work you do in self care and all the things that you have accomplished and are accomplishing. Now, you mentioned the Outlier Project, so let's talk a little bit about that before we go, and how people can get on board.
So the Outlier Project, I actually credit a lot of my ability to use my voice to get this message out, because it is a group of people who are so supportive of, and you're in it. So I'm so thankful that you're in the Outlier Project with us. It's a group of people who are so supportive of each other, who are so much aligned in a positive mindset and taking action. And the tagline is, anyone can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And we all believe that. And I know I've believed that, since I was younger. And so the Outlier Project, theoutlierproject.co is our website, and you can message me or find us on LinkedIn. We're all over LinkedIn. And yeah, we would love to see you, love to have you as part of the group.
Outstanding. And I echo that. Now, I'm going to have all the links to all that we've talked about and the resources as part of the show notes and video. So you'll be able to have all that information. Kathy, it's been a pleasure to talk self care with you. I wish you all the best. I know that I'll be rooting you all the way through all your endeavors. And folks, if self care was an issue, I hope that today it has become less of an issue, and that you are charting your way through self-care for yourself. I want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, and Harchester, London. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment right now. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast or want to sponsor our show, we'd love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.